In this tutorial session, we're going to look at psychology, and the topic we are going to tackle will be stress and stress management. Alright, let's get into it. So this is our outline. We'll first look at what stress is, the models of stress, the causes and consequences of stress, and also the coping strategies. Last but not the least, we're going to look at how you can manage stress. Alright, so let's look at what stress is. So stress is more like just a body alarm. So what this is something telling you that your body needs some attention. So you can also define stress as a physiological, psychological, and behavioral response that occurs when an individual perceives the environmental demands exceeds their ability to cope. So this is what stress is all about. It is just your body being on high alert. That is stress. So we can say that stress actually does something to your body, your mind, and it can also do something to your behavior. So what does stress do to your body? I'll give an example of maybe you have headache. So that stress, which is headache, will affect your body. It could be fast heartbeat. That is also stress. It could be poor sleep. It could be maybe an upset stomach. So that is still stress. Then what does stress do to your mind? It could be that you are racing in thoughts. So that is still stress. It could be irritability. It could be maybe forgetting things or just feeling overwhelmed. That is affecting your mind. It is still stress. We can also look at the behavioral aspect. It could be that the stress is affecting you in a way that you are procrastinating. So procrastinating, or maybe you are just snapping, scrolling, or just eating more or less. That is still stress, and it will affect your behavior. So we are saying stress can also be defined as the person's physical and mental, also emotional reaction to a certain stimulus. The keyword we need to get from there is here, where we are saying a certain stimulus, and this stimulus is what we call a stressor. So let's now look at what stressors are. So stressors can simply be events or situations that can trigger stress. So these could be positive, also known as the eustress, or they can be harmful, which are known as the distress. So this stress can affect, as I mentioned earlier, your mental, your physical, and also your behavioral aspects of your body. And the experience of stress demonstrates something that happens when you are negatively emotional, and it can become too much for you to handle it or manage it. All right, so let's look at these types of stress. So stress, as we alluded earlier, it can be positive or negative. There's positive stress and there's also negative stress. So what is positive stress? So with positive stress, we are saying that this is usually short term and it motivates us. So you feel excited. For example, maybe you have a promotion, or maybe you have learned a new hobby or a new activity, or maybe you have learned something, or maybe you have a new job interview. So that is a positive stress, something that is going to bring about the excitement. Maybe you have passed your examination, or maybe you've been called for a job interview. So that is still stress, but in a positive way. And for that reason, we call it positive stress. But there's also another aspect of stress, or type of stress rather, which we call negative stress. So negative stress, it is also short term, but sometimes it can be long term. And when you look at the negative stress, the causes could be maybe anxiety, or maybe you are just feeling unpleasant. So this can be triggered by maybe death of your partner, or when you are experiencing a certain illness, or in a certain situation whereby you have lost maybe employment, or you are just unemployed. So that is still a stress, and it will be affecting you in a negative way. So for that reason, we call it a negative stress. But there's also other types of stress. For example, the acute stress. So acute stress, it is just a stress that occurs due to a recent stressor, and it can last just for a short period of time. From the word acute, acute means something that will not last for a long period. Acute meaning that for a short period. So acute stress, we are saying it can only last for a short period of time, and it is caused due to a recent stressor. For example, you've lost a beloved one, or maybe you've lost employment. So there's something which is going to affect you later when you get to think about it. And it won't affect you for a long period of time, but it will just affect you for a short period of time, and your mind just gets to be stressed because of a recent disappointment, or maybe a misfortune which happened back time then there's also another type of stress which now will last for a long period of time, and this is what we call a chronic stress. So chronic stress is a long-term continuous stress from ongoing pressure. For example, you are going through hardship, or maybe sickness. So that thing which is a stressor, in a case of sickness, it will be deteriorating, and it will be affecting you over a long period of time. No wonder we're calling it chronic. Chronic because it is affecting, or it is prolonging, or maybe we can say its longevity is exceeding. So that is that is chronic stress. So when we're asked to talk about the types of stress, we need to mention the positive stress, the negative stress, the acute stress, and the chronic stress. Now let's look at the models of stress. So there's what is known as a stimulus model, and this was developed from an engineering model, and this was Hooks. So what Hooks discovered, it's about the law of elasticity. So Hooke's law, according to physics, it states that the extension of an object, or the elasticity of a certain object, will be direct proportional to the stressor, or will be direct proportional to the force that is being applied. And at a certain point, which we call the elastic limit, when that same object, elastic material, has been extended, exceeding that certain limit, the elastic limit, that object remains deformed. So that is according to Hooke's law, and this is falling under stimulus model. So Hooke's law, it is involving the deformation of a certain metal, or a certain elastic material, or any object once it is extended beyond what is known as the elastic limit. Then stress, as it is projected, it is seen as a stimulus in the environment, and it is disturbing to the adaptive ability of an organism. As we mentioned earlier, stress is something that is going to trigger you. It is causing a certain change on your body, and because it is causing a certain change on your body, we are calling it a stimulus. And it is seen to be a stimulus in the environment, because people will know that really this person is stressed, or this person is under stress. And also the other thing is that it is going to disturb your adaptability to that environment. It is going to change the way you are going to stay or maybe live in a certain environment. So that is what we need to know. All right. So according to this model, the stimulus model, it says that a certain amount of stress is needed to do two things. One, to keep you alert, or for you to adapt to a certain environment. I'll give an example whereby you've been very reluctant and you don't have any stress, then they announce maybe the day for examinations. So the announcement of the day of the examination will act as a stimulus, and that is the one which is going to keep you alert. You will now be that stress, like you start studying or maybe preparing in legends for the examination, because there's a certain stimulus that has been projected towards you or that has been said. So that stimulus is the one that will bring about that alertness and also that adaptability to the environment or to a certain event or occasion rather that has been scheduled ahead of you. So no wonder we are saying this is the type of stimulus type of model, or a stimulus model rather. All right, now let's look at all right, now let's look at what this model of stress, or stimulus model rather, can do to you. So we're saying that it can cause harm when it is too much. For example, when you have a lot of workload and there's just a short period of time for you to cover it, so that workload will harm you and it will bring about stress on you because it is just too much to handle for yourself. All right, then the second model, apart from the stimulus model, it is the response model. So what this response model is, it is just about stress being seen as a non-specific response of the body to the demands placed upon it. So this model is telling us that it is something that is not specific. Stress is just something that is going to come upon you and it will demand you to act on it. So that is according to the stimulus model. For example, you are not expecting the loss of a beloved one, but you just hear that someone has died. So that was not specific, that was not expected, but it has happened. So there will be a certain reaction that is going to be imposed on you by your body. You feel stressed, you feel angry, or you feel bereaved. So that is what is known as the response model of stress. But in general, when you're talking about the general adaptation, there is no matter what kind of stress is, your body has a certain pattern to your physiological reactions. So if a certain stress is on you, the body has a systematic way it is going to respond to it, and that is physiological. So that is what is known as the response model of stress. And one thing we need to understand here is that it was this model of response model rather, it was proposed by a certain psychologist known as Celios or Celios, okay, and that was in 1956. All right, now we are going to look at the physiology of stress. how is stress managed by the body, or how does stress come about due to the stimulation of your brain and all these other factors. So let's say we have a stressor. I'll use a pointer here. So let's say you have a stressor. So you have lost the employment, or you have been hurt, broken, or maybe you have lost a beloved one. So that thing which is going to act on your body, that is a stressor, and we call it a stimulus. So that stimulus, which is a stressor, is going to act on your brain. So the brain is the one which is going to be affected because of that stress. Now, your brain will do two things. It can release a certain hormone known as the adrenaline, or sometimes noradrenaline, and these will be released from the nerve endings. So what this adrenaline is going to do is that we know that adrenaline is a fight and flight hormone. So because it's a flight and fight hormone, it is released when the body is under stress for it to act to emergent needs. I'll give an example whereby you are going in a bush, maybe, then you you're just you just feel scared because of something which you have heard or seen. So there's a certain hormone which is going to be released, and that hormone is the one we are calling adrenaline. So that adrenaline will act on your body, and it will cause certain things to change, and that could be increase in heart rate and also blood pressure. The other thing, it can constrict your blood vessels, and also that adrenaline and no adrenaline, it is also able to slow down the digestion and also increase the respiration rate. So that is what this adrenaline and no adrenaline can do to your body. And also, in the other way, the brain can also release a certain hormone which can stimulate the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are just the glands which are located on the upper part of the kidney. So that adrenal gland, or those adrenal glands rather, they can also release certain hormones. For example, they're going to release cortisol. Okay, so the cortisol is released by the adrenal cortex, and this cortisol, we know that it is a stress hormone. Other than that, it can release the epinephrine. Okay, so it can also release the epinephrine, which is this epinephrine is released by the adrenal medulla. Okay, so once these hormones have been released, they're going to act on your body, and they'll do something to your body so that your body can respond to that stress. So that is one thing we need to understand from there. All right. So when you're looking at the models of stress, we have what is known as an alarm reaction and also resistance. So when you're talking about alarm reaction, just like the name itself, alarm reaction suggests, an alarm is something that is going to activate you, right? So it will be something like a reminder or something that is going to stimulate you. For example, you are sleeping, then you have set an alarm. So when that alarm rings, it is going to activate you so that you can be alert, or maybe you wake up. So alarm reaction, it is just the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and this is going to stimulate the adrenal medulla to secrete a certain hormone which is known as adrenaline. So that is under alarm reaction. Then there's also the resistance, and this resistance is going to bring about adaptation to a certain stress which has been placed on you. So we are saying that it is just the sympathetic activity. When it decreases, there's an adaptation of the stress places enormous demand on the body. So when that sympathetic activity, we said that in the first place, there's an alarm reaction whereby your body's sympathetic nervous system is activated. Now, when you talk about the resistance, that sympathetic activity now of the sympathetic nervous system is going to be decreased. But what happens here is that there will be adaptation to that stress, and it is going to place on a huge demand on your body. So that is under resistance. So the other thing we need to understand on these models is that there is exhaustion. When you're under stress, your body becomes exhausted. So if the autonomic activity or the autonomic nervous system goes on, maybe for a certain period of time, the body will become exhausted, and there will be what is known as adrenal malfunction, whereby the hormones in your body, the adrenaline, will not perform well, and there will be a decrease in your blood sugar. And because there's a decrease in the blood sugar, one, it can bring about two major conditions. One, there could be hypoglycemia. Hypoglycemia is just a condition whereby there is low glucose level in your body. Low glycemia, you're talking about glucose. So low glucose in your body, that is hypoglycemia. And this can also lead to instant death. So when there's exhaustion, your body is exhausted, there's that adrenal malfunction, your body's adrenaline is not able to perform well, and there's low blood sugar levels, it can lead to these two conditions. All right, now let's look at what is known as transactional model. So this was proposed by a certain psychologist, Lazarus, and also a friend, Folkman, and that was in 1984. All right, so under this model, stress is just perceived or maybe viewed as an individual perception rooted in psychological processes. So we are talking about stress as affecting an individual. Okay, of course there could be something which can affect, there can be stress which can affect a huge number of people, a group of people rather, but stress is something which an individual is going to perceive, so it affecting someone individually. So that is according to transactional model, it is viewed to affect an individual, and this just comes about due to some psychological processes. So something that is going to come up in your mind, you start thinking about, okay, I've lost employment, so how am I going to survive? So those perceptions or those psychological processes, thinking about how you're going to survive, how you're going to feed the family, how you're going to sponsor children, how you're going to pay school fees, how you're going to sustain everything. So that is a psychological process, and those psychological processes are what is going to bring about stress, and that is according to transactional models. Individuals are seen as an active participant in the process of emotional arousal. So when there is that emotional stimulation, So that certain individual is the one who is going to participate in it, who is going to start getting stressed. So that is one thing we need to understand. And on that model, stress is said to arise when there is an imbalance between a perceived demand of a situation and the person's perceived ability to do with those demands. So just like I said, there is this loss of employment, and also how you're going to take care of the children, the family, pay school fees, and all those. So when there's that imbalance, they are going to bring about stress. You're talking about the demands of the situation. So you've lost the employment. Now, what are the demands? How are you going to sustain yourself? So that is what stress is under this model known as the transactional model. All right, now let's look at the stages of stress. So there are basically 3 stages of stress, and those are alarm stage, resistance stage, and exhaustion stage. So we're going to look at them, how it is going to affect you externally, and also how it is going to affect you internally, and also what would be the impact. All right, so let's look at the first stage, which we call the alarm stage. So as the name itself suggests, alarm, so it's just going to trigger you. It could be a threat, it could be fear, or anything that is going to trigger you, so that your amygdala can be activated. So that is the alarm stage. Okay, you are frightened. So what's next? Adrenaline is going to be released. So that is alarm stage. Then what's this adrenaline is going to do in your body? Then that is now internally. So there's a conditioned reaction to your stressor. So as I said earlier, you are frightened, adrenaline is released. So that adrenaline, what it is going to do to you, there's that fight and flight freeze. Okay, so it is going to make your respiratory rates, or the breathing rates, to increase. It is going to cause the dilation of the blood, uh, blood vessels. It is going to bring about the increase in heartbeat, heart rate, and all that. Then what would be the impact in this alarm stage? So there's heart rate increase, there's blood sugar increase, there's muscle tension, and what would be now the effect? So there's lost focus, and you have what is known as racing thoughts. Okay, and sometimes it can bring about fear and anxiety. So that those are the impact and also the effects. So that is alarm stage. So under alarm stage, there's just something, a stimulus, which is going to trigger you, and you're going to act in a certain way, or your body rather is going to respond in a particular way. That is alarm stage. Then there's now this second stage, which we call the resistance stage. Okay, this stress now has persisted. This stressor rather has persisted. So what is next now? Okay, so there's now what is known as HPA. So HPA axis will be activated. Okay, so now there is the release of this hormone, which is the cortisol, and internally what this cortisol is going to do, it is just bringing about the physical and mental coping to resist that stressor. So that is under resistance stage. And what is going to happen is that the body now will seek a certain way which it can maintain that constant environment, or which it is going to stabilize itself, and that is just homeostasis. So your body is going to seek homeostasis. So what will be now the impact? So the impact will be poor sleep, or it could be lower immunity, unstable mood, mental fatigue. You are just tired mentally, okay? And it can also lead to high emotional reactivity. So that is under alarm stage. Then under exhaustion stage, now the demands have overwhelmed you. So now what is going to happen? So there is adaptive resources, or rather the adaptive resources which have been depleted. So this stress now has become too much for you to control, or it is now beyond control, and that is going to bring about exhaustion. So what would be the impact? So the impact would be chronic fatigue, whereby you're just tired for a long period of time, and it is going to affect your health, your mental well-being, and also bring about cognitive decline. So those are the stages of stress. First one, alarm. Alarm is going just to trigger your body. There's this amygdala, which is activated. Adrenaline is now released. Adrenaline causing conditioned reaction to a certain stressor. There's fight and flight freeze, and also bring about high heart rates, high blood pressure, muscle tension, and it can now cause the lost focus, racing thoughts, and also fear, in other terms anxiety. Then the second stage would be the resistance. Now the stressor, or the thing which is stressing you, has persisted. Okay, it is not going anywhere, so it is there. Now what is going to happen? So there is the release of cortisol. Then it is going to bring about the mental and physical coping, so that your body rather can adapt to that stressor, or it can resist the stress. So your body now will seek a certain way in which it can handle stress, or maybe bring about homeostasis, and the effect is going to bring about poor immunity, poor sleep, unstable mood, mental fatigue, high emotional reactivity. Then if now the stressor is too much for you to handle, now your body, it becomes overwhelmed. Now the resources, the thing to help you, has been depleted. So it is going to bring about now chronic fatigue, poor health, mental health, and cognitive decline. So that is what we need just to understand on the stages of stress. Okay, so the provoking question here is: stress good or bad? And now, what are the causes of stress? All right, we can say stress is good. In other times, stress is bad. So we can say stress is good in a rationale whereby it has maybe it has should I say, it has triggered that excitement. So in that case, it is considered to be good. But once it brings about maybe exhaustion, once it brings about depression, stress is bad. So as we alluded earlier, that stress can bring about alertness, and in times where you need to perform a certain task in a certain period of time, there is that increased alertness, there is that increased reminder that you need to perform a certain task, or you need to carry out a certain work. So that would be a good stress. And stress now can be something which is going to affect you in a bad way. So stress can either be good or bad. So as those models we looked at, so stress can arise from two important aspects. Okay, so it could be biological or physiological responses. So we can look at the life changing events, the daily hassles, the personal concerns, or maybe the trauma. But there's also what is known as PTSD, which is just post traumatic stress disorder. It is a syndrome which is brought about due to increased arousal, experiencing elements of trauma, avoidance of a stimulus associated with trauma. So this is a disorder which someone is going to experience when they are traumatized, or maybe when they are undergone or exposed to a certain amount of stress. All right, so when you're looking at the causes or sources of stress and stressors, the first thing we should take into consideration is the environment. So something which comes out of the environment, it could be maybe the weather is not conducive, it could be just the noise, it could be maybe just a lot of people, or maybe the place is overcrowded, it could be pollution, it could be just the traffic, unsafe or substandard housing, or maybe crime. So there's something which the environment is going to place on you. So that is a stress originating or coming from an environment. So in that aspect, we say an environment can be a source of stress. But we also have the social stressors. For example, when you talk about the aspect of relationships, so there could be a situation where these people are in a relationship and it is not doing so well. Maybe the boyfriend or girlfriend is acting up, or maybe they have their own reasons. This one is busy, not answering calls, or maybe something of that kind. So it could be a social stressor. Sometimes also it could be deadlines. You've been told, okay, the assignment has to be submitted tomorrow, and you have not yet prepared, or you haven't done anything yet. Then the deadline is just too immediate. So that can bring about stress. And sometimes it could be due to financial problems. For example, you don't have money to buy food, or maybe you're a student, you don't have money to buy something which you really need during your time you are learning. So that could be a stressor. It could be due to job interviews. For example, you attend a job interview and it didn't go well, or maybe you are even certain that you won't get the job. So that could also affect you, or stress you rather. And it could be sometimes due to disagreements. You are just involved in this disagreements, or your friends just can't understand, or you can't just resolve certain issues with your friends, or maybe the people around you, and that could be a stressor. Other times it could be academic or demands. The workload is just too much, the time frame to cover the workload is just minimal, and it could lead to stress. Other times, as I've been mentioning, it could be loss of a loved one, it could be divorce. A certain couple just decide to go apart, so just to divorce, and end the marriage. So that could be also a source of stress. Other times could be co-parenting. All right, so as we mentioned previously, that the stressors could come from the environment, and also that includes the social stressors, but these stressors can also be physiological. So physiologically, it could be one of the source of stress. So in this aspect, we are considering situations or circumstances that are directly affecting your body, and these could include rapid growth of adolescence. It could be menopause. On rapid growth of adolescence, I can give an example of when you are young, everything your parents were able to provide for you, were able to provide you with clothing and all these other things that you need. But once you turn into adolescence, now there is not so much care, or should I say, there is this certain responsibility, maybe to buy yourself clothes and these other things that you need. So that could be a physiological stressor or a physiological source of stress, because it is going to affect your mind in such a way that you start thinking, okay, what am I going to buy? Where am I going to get the money and all that, and all those things? Another thing, it's menopause. All right. And also, it could be illness, aging, it could be accidents, lack of exercise, poor nutrition, and sleep disturbances. So, all those are physiological sources of stress. The other thing, it could be just your thoughts, your brain interpretation, and also how it is perceiving certain situations. Something which is stressful, or maybe it is just difficult, painful, or just present. So those thoughts which your brain is contemplating, there would be some sources of stress, and some situations in life are just stress provoking, and it is our thoughts now which are going to determine whether they are the problem to focus on, or whether we are going to manage them or not. So thoughts, physiological, environmental, those are sources of stress. All right, we've talked about stress quite enough, and we need now to understand how we can now cope with this stress. So we are now talking about the coping strategies. What is going to help us so that we can cope with this stress? All right, so when you're talking about coping is just a process in which an individual is going to try to manage the stress or deal with the stress that he or she is facing. And for us to talk about how we are going to cope stress, we should couple it with the defense mechanism. All right, so defense mechanisms are just sometimes confused with coping strategies. Okay, now the distinction here is that with the defense mechanisms, there are unconscious processes which occur in an individual as a way to cope with the anxiety or the stress, and the works by altering and this works by altering an individual's perception of reality. But when you're talking about coping mechanism, these are conscious ways of attempting to resolve the stress. So one of the major difference between the coping mechanism and also the defense mechanism. Defense mechanism is your body trying to deal with stress unconsciously. You are not aware of it, and that body is trying to cope with this anxiety, or maybe trying to change the way you are thinking. So you're trying to think in a different way, your body is trying to manage that stress unconsciously. That is a defense mechanism. But when you are trying to solve the certain issue, or maybe you're trying to resolve a certain stress consciously, that is a coping mechanism. And under coping mechanism, we are trying to focus on the problem which is there, and also emotions which are going to emerge. So problem focused, coping mechanism is problems focused, and also emotional focused. All right. So under this coping strategy, we look at the direct action. So as we are saying, direct action, it is something that is directly trying to change the situation. So under direct action, when you're talking about coping strategy, you're trying to change the situation. That is direct action. Then there's also what is known as information seeking, where you try to understand and find a better way in which you're going to solve a certain issue. So you're trying to understand the situation and also predict what should I do next, or what will happen next. So that is information seeking. Then there's inhibition of action. Okay, there is this stress and you're doing nothing, and this is maybe a situation whereby a person has no control over the situation. Okay, so you look at the inhibition of you look at what is going now to happen, because you have no control over the situation. In a case where there is loss of a beloved one, you have no control over that situation. You can't do anything. So that is what is known as inhibition of action. The other way you can tend to cope with the stress, it could be turning to others, seek help, and also seek emotional support. Consult. If you need help, it's better you ask from people who might render the support on you. So that is one way we can deal with the stress. So we've talked about the direct action, you directly trying to change the situation, and also information seeking. Okay, you are there seated trying to understand what will happen next and how should I resolve this situation. Then there's also inhibition of action, where you have nothing to do and the situation which is there, it is beyond your control. And also how you're going to cope with this stress is by turning to others, seeking help, and also emotional support. But there are also what are known as cognitive techniques. When you're talking about cognitive, you're talking about something to do with your mental aspect, your thinking, and also your personal views. So under cognitive techniques, you are trying to change your personal view of the situation. Okay, this situation that has happened is bad, but how are you going to still remain positive even in that situation which is bad? So that is cognitive technique. You're trying to change your perception about the situation so that you can remain neutral, or you can remain positive despite the bad thing on the ground. Then there are also what are known as behavioral techniques of handling stress, or behavioral techniques of for coping strategies. And these are about taking control over your physiological symptoms. So how are you going to take control over your physiological symptoms? It could be by relaxing. It could be by meditation, it could be by exercise, so you tend to cope with the stress, whereby you start something which is going to keep you active, or maybe something which you're going to do for enjoyment, for pleasure or leisure, something that is going to keep your thoughts away from that bad thing. So you can involve yourself into a certain physical activity, maybe running, or you start playing football or something, any activity or something which you're going to enjoy. Then also there's sleep hygiene, sleeping, having enough sleep. It could be another way of handling stress, and also uh, doing something that is going to distract you from the same stress. Okay, it could be also imagery. Yeah, you try to have that perception of just thinking about something else apart from the matters on the ground. So that could also be another way in which we can cope with the stress. All right, so what should we take note, or what are our key takeaways from what we've just discussed? So one thing we need to take note is that stress is unavoidable. You can't avoid stress. Stress comes on each and every person, and there is no way you can completely avoid it. You can avoid a certain stress, but another stress in a different way will affect you. So you should just know that it is easy, or it is possible to manage stress, but it can't be avoided completely. Then the other thing we should also take note is that recognition and also the coping measures are essential when someone is stressed. Other than that, we should also look at the health coping mechanisms that can improve your well-being and also your performance. So those are important things we need to take note of. All right, so we've talked about having enough sleep. You sleep for 7 to 8 hours, okay, because your brain gets tired and more stressed, so you need that refreshment. Or maybe you can just take a walk. Maybe you try to move just for refreshment. You take a walk, you go somewhere, you go to a beautiful place, you enjoy the environment and all that. Or it could be involving in a certain activity. Maybe you like gym, you go to gym. Or maybe you like dancing, or just any physical activity, running, which is going just to move or to burn off that cortisol. Okay, so that is one way. And the other thing, it's about having a balanced diet. Eat well, hydrate, drink enough water, because too much sugar, too much things we take which contains caffeine can cause more stress. So that water plus the balanced diet which contains vitamins, proteins, they are going to help your mood to stay steady. So that is also another way to deal with stress. And the other thing in which we can respond to stress, or another coping strategy, is setting boundaries. You need to set boundaries. At least you don't have to say yes to everything, or every each and every invitation. everywhere you are going because you've been invited or because you've been asked to do it. So setting boundaries is very important. Know what you can do, know when to say yes, and know when to say no. Protect yourself in that way by setting boundaries. The other thing is about connecting. When you are stressed, it is very important for you to find someone to talk to. So you talk to someone because when you tend to share what you're going through, that stress, it seems to be less when it is shared. It seems to be something which is small and manageable because you have shared it. Of course, the person you are sharing to might not be the one to deal with your stress or to solve it, but just by the way of sharing, by just giving you that listening ear, they just hear it or listen to you, even when they can't do anything about it. It could be one way in which that stress can feel smaller and manageable. So it is very important to take note of that. All right, so we'll conclude by making one important point. When you are stressed, get extra support. Reach out to a doctor, it could be to a counselor, it could be to a trusted person. Explain to them, talk to them, tell them about what is stressing you, and in that way you will avoid panicking attacks or maybe consistent anxiety. You avoid those things that is going to drag you, affect your mental well-being, and also the way you perceive. So it is very important to seek extra help when you are stressed. Alright, thank you. This is the end of stress and stress management. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you so much.